Bonjour à toutes et à tous, et je suis très heureuse de vous accueillir dans les locaux de Comet Bourse. Après 2 ans de réunions à distance, ça fait vraiment du bien de pouvoir vous retrouver en vrai, en chair et en os, en présentiel. Merci à tous de votre présence. Alors, notre conférence de ce jour, d'aujourd'hui, va être consacrée à la stratégie européenne de normalisation qui, vous le savez, a été publiée le 2 février dernier, pour une stratégie de normalisation plus ambitieuse, pour une Europe plus souveraine et plus verte. Alors, pour ceux qui ne me connaissent pas, je suis Christine Kertész, responsable du département Relations adhérents d'AFNOR, et je vais animer cette réunion aujourd'hui, cette conférence, avec Elena Santiago
I'll be
Cid.
with Elena Santiago Cid, head of CEN and CENELEC.
À suivre.
We have more than 350 people with us today. We'd like to thank you. There will be different sessions today. To start with, what we're going to do is that we'll be talking about the European standardization policies, and then we'll give you more information about the EU standardization strategy. Then we'll listen to CEN, CENELEC, and ETSI, and then we'll have 2 round tables. To illustrate this, the first one will be on critical metals, and the second one will be on the interactions between innovation research and standardization. And then we'll conclude. We'll have 2 speakers to conclude, as you will see in a minute. Technical information before we start. If you're in the room, the conference will be held mainly in French, but sometimes also in English. So if you want to, we have headsets so that you can listen to the interpreters. You can listen to either French, English, or German. You'll have to use the headsets if you're in Paris in the room. Don't hesitate if you have any questions. We will take as many questions as we can during this conference. And then, for those who are listening on the internet, it's more or less the same. Of course, you'll have to mute your microphones and please don't use your camera. You can use the chat function and you can listen either to French, English, or German. That's for the Zoom listeners and viewers. This being said, as I said earlier on, we'll try and take as many questions as we can this morning. If we don't have time enough to answer your questions, we'll try and provide answers in writing after the conference. Now, we can start with the first part of our conference dedicated to the European standardization policies.
Alors, pour cette première partie, je vais appeler Marc Ventre, président
part, we will welcome Mr. Ventre, the AFNOR chairman. Mr. Ventre, the floor is yours. Commissioner, European Commissioner,
les présidentes et présidents,
dear chairs and presidents, dear colleagues, dear friends, either in Paris or at a distance, welcome. I'm very happy and proud to welcome you to this AFNOR conference during the French presidency of the Council of the EU. We still have a few days before we hand over to the Czech Republic. By the way, we don't know if this is due to chance or not. The UNMZ, the Czech Office for Standards, Metrology and Testing, hosted the General Assembly of CEN and CENELEC last week. This is a joint general meeting that really shows that Europe has a voice at international level. Standardization is a tool that's essential for the competitiveness of the member states. It's also essential for the twin transition and to develop a model that follows the European principles. The health crisis has hit us for more than 2 years, to which we have to add the conflict in Ukraine, have highlighted how fragile our societies and economies are. We very much rely on globalization, and we've seen also the 2 main transitions. During the crises, people have used words such as resilience and sovereignty. Voluntary, and I mean voluntary standardization, to me, is essential to come up with an answer and with new models. This is what we'll be talking about, and I'd like to thank the high-level speakers who accepted to join us. Without further ado, I'd like to thank you for being here this morning, and I'll hand over to Thierry Breton, European Commissioner. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Marc Ventre, dear Marc Ventre, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here in person in Paris. If you're following us on the Zoom interface, thank you for inviting me under the supervision of the French Presidency of the Council of the EU that has been very active and dynamic in the past 6 months, and thanks to which Europe has moved forward with more resilience and sovereignty. This is something very important for us, as well as autonomy, and that's why I think 2022 is going to be a crucial year, given the topic you're working on, that I'm working on, that everybody's interested in, as well as my teams who are following us today. Well, this is a very important issue, which is that of standardization. Let's call a spade a spade. Well, we got off to a very good start in the field of standardization. Well, last century that was. And then, with the new century, we tended to rest on our laurels. Standardization and industrial policies usually go hand in hand, and we didn't realize this. Skills and competencies were going away, and as well as our representation in the global standardization agencies. Some decided to seize this opportunity since we were not doing much. Well, it's not either us or our predecessors or the ones before, but we're all collectively responsible for what's happening. And let's face it, since we're talking about standardization, there's an elephant in the room, and that's China. Well, they didn't rest on their laurels. China's understood that they had to react. I remember when I was working for an industrial group, that was last century, the notion of patents was really not something that people were talking about, and standardization either. Well, the Chinese have understood. They've invested massively in standardization. This is a policy. It's an important working stream for the Chinese on their political agenda. After doing that, they started gaining market share and taking positions in all the standardization bodies, ISO and others. And in the meantime, Europe was having mixed feelings, was divided. There was a laissez-faire. And when I took this position, I told my teams, this is no longer possible. We have to be the masters of our own destiny. This is what you wanted as well. So you found a commissioner who's all ears, is going to listen to you, and I'm very happy about this. We've had very fruitful discussions, quite many discussions, and as you said earlier on, I presented this proposal at the beginning of the year, the objective being to react to this situation that I described earlier on. And to do this, we'll look at two things. We've all realized that what's at stake is our industrial leadership for the breakthrough technologies mainly, without which we wouldn't succeed with the twin transition. Some European bodies were in the hands of some industrial groups. I reacted to this, and you know what I mean. We will change this. In addition, we're the first continent, and I must underscore that. We've seen this in recent developments, unfortunately, with the war at present on our continent, European continent, war wedged by Vladimir Putin. Well, we have quite a large number of challenges to address. And Europe is the first internal market and the first democracy in the world. We are 1.5 times bigger than the US, 370 million inhabitants, to be compared with 240 million in Europe. Well, setting aside India, they have a different democratic model. We are the first democracy. If you look at what's happening recently in the US, in terms of quality, we're probably number one as well. Well, I don't want to go through what happened this weekend, but we have evidence. So soft power today is the responsibility of the first democracy on earth, and that is Europe. Europe is the first democracy. This is complicated and difficult. It's a challenge for us day in, day out. And we have in Europe to protect our citizens with social standards that are more demanding, and we work on the value chain as well to protect the way people work and our impact on the environment. We think that what we're doing is that we're trying to protect everybody, the Europeans, and that means protecting individuals.
Tout ce qu'il faut pour garantir, par exemple, que les technologies biométriques.
For instance, biometric technologies have to comply with privacy, which is not the case in many countries, on many continents. All this really shows that the notion of standards is not something simple.
De points, et c'est pas étonnant que l'Europe ait décidé de s'en ressaisir.
No wonder that Europe has decided to react.
C'est très important, souveraineté et autonomie.
And it goes beyond the notions of sovereignty and autonomy.
Que nous souhaitons.
A few words about our European strategy, the European strategy that we're trying to deploy, and the drawing up of our industrial policies in the field of standardization. Here again, and I'll repeat what I said, we truly need to have a standardization system that is robust, integrated, which is what I said on the 2nd of February, which is what I'm repeating today. Our system has to remain transparent and open, of course, and inclusive and fair. Everybody can join, but everybody has to follow the rules. So the rules have to be clear. And I think we were too naive so far. For instance, we have a European standardization body where we have non-European members, which are the winners, if I can say. They decide, they make the decisions concerning our harmonized European standards. This is no longer possible. This has to change. This is why we've changed the regulation on European standardization to give the national standardization bodies, such as AFNOR, of course, a crucial role in these systems, which will guarantee an inclusive process. And we have to factor in all the different elements in the value chain, including the SMEs. This is also the reason why the Commission has decided, well, in an implicit way with the General Assembly in Prague several days ago, has decided to entrust the new cybersecurity standardization request to CEN and CENELEC, and not ETSI, as you've probably understood. This is much more than technical competence. Cybersecurity covers all of the aspects of our lives and also our strategic autonomy. And in a general way, it has to do with the integrity of the European Union. The second point I'd like to mention this morning is the fact that it is necessary to make sure that the drafting of standards be faster. We're too slow. And drafting of standards should be included in a toolbox to serve innovation, but also resilience and the digital transformation and the twin transformation. We're doing this in the field of cybersecurity. We work on the Cyber Resilience Act and also the Chip Act, where in the European Chip Act, we've included the dimension of standardization and we will need something else, which is very important today. We will need a standard for the recycling of critical materials, lithium, magnesium, magnets, and all rare materials that we use today in the digital transition and the green transition. We know that without standards, we will not have a digital ID for products, which is what we need to see if they're accepted on the internal market, and to see if we can monitor the life cycle of finished products, but also of components in these finished goods, so that we can recycle them properly in the framework of our sustainability policy, which goes hand in hand with industrial policy. These are some of our priorities that we've clearly identified in a methodical way and strategically. You'll be able to discuss this morning with my teams. And of course, this means that we'll mobilize the resources that we need. This is why we've organized a high-level forum that will be addressing these aspects that we're rolling out at present, so as to address in a practical and quick way these objectives. My third idea has to do with training and education. This is a very important topic. I think we've not done enough. We need more awareness, and usually companies have decided that this was a non-issue. Is it to be dealt with by purchasing or legal? It was unclear. I saw that from within. It was not escalating enough. This is a very strategic topic. Of course, what we need is awareness. That's your role. But we need training, we need skills. And that means that we need to have enough resources to create a new generation of experts. This is a field of expertise. It's a very important and interesting field, which means that we need a generation of talents so that they work in corporates, so that they can dive out and support SMEs. And this generation will represent us at a very high level in the on the top technical bodies that play an important role. And I think that we don't have enough high-level experts at present on these bodies. That's because we've not trained them properly before, even though we have talents. And finally, my last point this morning, last but not least, is the international agenda. The context or the backdrop is more and more volatile, which is what I said in my introduction. And this is going to last. It's going to be tough. There will be many constraints. There will be many uncertainties as well. And we know that we'll be able to continue and survive, will be heard only because we are a continent. What's happening on Earth today or nowadays is unfortunately something that shows that there are more and more continental shocks. That's something we were feeling, and that's something we're seeing at present. And I'm not just talking about the war in Ukraine and its consequences. And the Juncker Commission called China the systemic rival, partners, but also rivals. So that's the end of us being naive. And as such, European standards have to be seen as authority. They have to have authoritative power at a global level. And to conclude, I'd like to repeat what I said earlier on, using the same words. We have to have a stronger will. We have to make sure that the 27 standardization bodies and the ISO and the IEC and the other international bodies have to be united. We will exist because we're united, and the ITU as well. We shouldn't do things in a scattered way. If we're united, we'll have more clout, and it wouldn't work individually. And this means that we have to be united and express just one voice. We have to work with our commercial partners, the TTC is an example. They were meeting here in Paris, the Technology and Trade Council, with the Secretary to Trade. And we've decided to work in close coordination. We have a strategic coordination mechanism to standardize international activities. Everybody is going to contribute. We're not dependent from each other. We know our power and who we are, and therefore this partnership is going to be strong. The partners will also bring some of their might. This is a partnership. A partnership doesn't mean you're going to take all the benefits of your partner to offset your own weaknesses. We'll fix our weaknesses and we'll be stronger at international level. Right, I'm very happy to see that the DG teams are here with me, with COZIGOU, who's in the room, but also the Chief Standardization Officer. So you see we have Chief Standardization Officer. I hope you have your own CSOs in your companies. We have also people following us from Brussels, and they will be answering your questions and sharing our views with you this morning. I trust that we'll make it. We'll succeed because there's a wake-up call, I think it was high time. It's never too late because we have skills, we have experience, we have competencies. So what's very important is to get this awareness. We have to realize that these issues are very important, the issues that you'll be dealing with, and rest assured that this is one of our priorities on the EC's agenda. Among the many things I have to work on, this is a very important priority for us. And I'm here to help you and support you so that we're more competitive and autonomous, strategically speaking. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Breton, for this introduction. Now we'll be listening to Miroslav CHLOUPEK, representative of Deputy President of the Czech Office for Standards, Metrology and Testing. As Marc Fontre said, the Czech Republic will be at the presidency of the Council of the EU. You have the floor, sir.
Okay, Mr. Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am very pleased to be here with you and I have to thank the organizers for inviting me to present here some ideas about the Czech presidency and also to say a few words about our office. Czech Office for Standards, Metrology and Testing is a state budgetary organization established in 1993 and is responsible for standardization and many other policies. We are also the national standardization body. This year, 2022, is very important for our country and for standardization in our country, not only because we will have the presidency starting on this Friday, and in the presidency, we will deal with a lot of issues which are connected with standardization, but also we in this year celebrate 100 years of standardization in the Czech Republic and former Czechoslovakia. The first standardization body in the Czech country was established in 1922, so it's 100 years. And it is one of the reasons why we had the CEN and CENELEC General Assembly last week in Prague. I think some of you participated or you know about it. We're speaking about the Czech presidency. You can see our logo here and a few words what we can do and how we can contribute to improvement of standardization during our presidency. There is a lot of issues in the standardization area on the table. As it was mentioned by Mr. Commissioner, the strategy on standardization was published in the beginning of the year. It's on the table and it's the topic of today's meeting. We have on the table also the amendment of the regulation 1025 on standardization. CEN and CENELEC issued also the strategy for next years. And there is a lot of standardization parts and issues in the so-called sectoral legislation. We can speak about construction products, which will be negotiated during our presidency. We can speak about machinery regulation, which is also part of our agenda on the presidency, and we can speak about a lot of other pieces of legislation which are on the table or will be on the table in a very near future. It's surprising how much standardization is included in many pieces of legislation, even it doesn't look very technical. We have a lot of new challenges in the EU, which were also mentioned, especially the green policy and digitalization, and all this must be taken as one global approach. What we understand for standardization in the future is that standardization will have to and will keep or even improve its position in the system. It's impossible to have the legislation and to have the products on the market without standards. And the standardization system must be improved, but will keep the position. It must reflect the requirements given by new policies, as it was mentioned, and must correspond with legal rules and requirements. It's also one of the topics and one of the problems. It is very important that we need new people to work in the standardization. We must bring new experts and we must educate people. It was also mentioned by Mr. Commissioner a few minutes ago. And this is a big problem for countries like ours because we have a lot of industry, but we don't have a lot of technicians to work. We have a lot of economists, we have a lot of people studying different subjects, but not people who know the standards and who know the technical matters. If I go back to the picture, was impossible to go back, yes. I go back to the picture of our logo of the presidency. You can see it's composed of figures which symbolize compass needles, if you don't recognize it without this information. We hope that we can help standardization to keep the clear and correct course in the troubled waters of today's negotiations. And standardization is on the program of our presidency, not only as amendment of the regulation of 1025. The first meeting in the council will be in the second week of July for this, and then we have to negotiate with the parliament probably. But also with the standardization parts of a number of different legislation, as I told before. I have to say that ideas of the new strategy fully correspond with some of the priorities of the Czech presidency. We have also other very important priorities which correspond with the situation on the east part of Europe, with the war, with the energy problems, with the economic problems, but also the green and digital market is one of the priorities of the Czech presidency. We have not only the logo, but we also have the motto of the presidency. And the motto is, it's not very good in English, but in Czech it sounds better. Europe as a task, rethink, rebuild, repower. It is a motto which was taken from one of the speeches of our former president, Mr. Václav Havel. I think he spoke about this in Paris some 25 years ago. And I think it's a good motto not only for standardization, but for the whole program of our presidency. We very much need information about how the process of changes in standardization will continue. There is a lot of stakeholders, a lot of people who are interested what will happen with standardization organizations, what will happen with standards, how the legislation and how the standards will influence the economy and their life. So I am very glad and very happy to be here today and to hear discussion between the representatives of the Commission and of the standardization bodies about the future of standardization. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Miroslav CHLOUPEK, et j'appelle à présent Madame Annika Andreasen, qui représente.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miroslav CHLOUPEK. I will now ask Annika Andreasen, who is the chair of the Swedish Standardization.
Gentlemen, good morning. As CEO of Swedish Institute for Standards, which is a national standard organization of the member state holding the EU presidency in the first half of 2023, and now part of the three-year presidency, I would like to join in thanking the EU presidency and AFNOR holding this conference addressing the current challenges in the field of standardization, an important topic. Over the last 30 years, European standards have played a key role in the development of the single market. From a Swedish perspective, the challenges for all of us is to deliver together on the twin green and digital transition and to support innovation. It is clear to us that our common EU ambitions towards a climate neutral, resilient and circular economy cannot be delivered without European standards. As part of the standardization community, we also wish to contribute to ensure the future competitiveness of the sustainable EU exports and investments. Definitions and standards can contribute to build trust, both for companies along the value chains, but also for end customers. It is of great importance that the standards become relevant and usable. This requires active participation from industry, but also from researchers, consumers, and the whole of society. From the Swedish side, we are ready to act in support of the global role of the European standardization system and to build upon our common strengths. And we are ready to continue improving the current standardization system. In Sweden, stakeholders regularly highlight the importance of better conditions for international free, fair, and sustainable trade. But they also want regulatory simplifications and higher compliance through cooperation between the state, the business, and the civil society. And standards can do that. We need to use the system. Our stakeholders also expect that we make sure to avoid ambiguity and fragmentation in the international standardization initiatives. I would like to underline the need to engage with all stakeholders at the national and European level and with like-minded at the international level. I'm happy to say that all our stakeholders in Sweden, both big companies, SMEs, public authorities, and representatives for consumers, have joined in emphasizing the importance of building on the strengths of the current standardization system. We have something good to build on. What we need to do is to reaffirm our commitment to act together, to continue providing solutions to current and future challenges. We need to strengthen the relations with research innovators and startups to ensure that their innovation successfully is transferred to technology ready for the market. We need to be ready to engage in a constructive dialogue to embrace standardization in new areas and act fast and ensure time to market, and also bring on the young professionals. We all need to raise awareness among European business management of the strategic role of standardization and of the added value of the implementation of standardization in their products and services. This is not known by everyone today. But also raise awareness of the existing standards and the possibility offered by the system of public-private collaboration, which are open, transparent, and agreed, and with representation from all stakeholders. It is important to preserve the strength of the public-private partnership between the European standardization organizations and the European Commission that is framed in Regulation 1025. But we also need to regularly and consistently follow up on the standardization strategy. All of us together, representative of the standardization organization, the Commission, member states in active cooperation with our stakeholders. We have now a momentum to promote standardization that enhances the twin transition, support sustainable development, and support innovation. It is important that standards in such areas become international, so we can reach the international leverage. Through our engagement at the international level, we and our broad range of stakeholders will actively contribute to the dialogue with the EU partners and at the international level during the Swedish EU presidency. Sweden is ready to play a part. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Alors vient le moment où nous aurions dû avoir la présence d'un représentant.
So we should have had a representative of the French government, but as you know, due to the current political situation in France, this wasn't possible. So Mr. Macron is going to read out the message sent by Gwenole.
Bien, donc oui, donc je voulais excuser Bruno Le Maire qui est.
Thank you. So unfortunately, Bruno Le Maire is very busy right now. He couldn't attend this meeting, especially due to the G7 meeting. And he sent this message, so I'm going to read it out to you. So AFNOR has to contribute to the standardization effort via the support provided to public companies. And this is due to the work done by various standardization bodies. And this has highlighted the competitive advantages that future standards could provide. As we are implementing the national standardization strategy, AFNOR is the act that is going to live up to the challenges associated with those issues. It's going to federate the parties that are going to produce standards. So there's a lot of competition. They're going to also accompany actors in international responsibility at the European and national levels. In order to strengthen the French and economies while still providing for their sovereignty on the digital and economic view, I therefore welcome the effort led by Chairwoman.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur. Nous allons à présent passer à la seconde
Thank you so much. We are now going to move to the second part of this conference. We're going to talk about European standardization strategy, and we'll call upon Elena Sanchez-Gossid, who together with Gwenole and COZIGOU are going to moderate the second part of this conference.
Bonjour, Madame, Messieurs, c'est un
hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be here in Paris, in France today.
Vraiment isolé.
We haven't been able to meet during 2 years, and it's a great pleasure to see people in person and to have this topical discussion on this very important topic that of standardization. I'm going to switch to English. Alors, je vais maintenant passer au français parce que c'est
our first speaker of this second part, Monsieur Gwenole COZIGOU, and I hope I pronounced your name rightly. A little bit of a background about Monsieur COZIGOU, an economist by training. He has been an official in the European Commission since 1985 in the fields of enterprise and industrial policy and external relations. Currently, he is director for the ecosystem dealing with construction, machinery, and standardization. And he is in the European Commission's Directorate General for Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship, and SMEs, which is very well known as DG GROW. Previously, he has been responsible for circular economy, energy union, energy-intensive industries, again, construction, automotive industries, raw materials, engineering, and maritime industries. It's a really wide and extensive discipline. And he held the position of director at DG GROW in charge of competitiveness issues and EU internal market legislation for several other industrial sectors, including REACH and medical devices. Before that, Monsieur COZIGOU held the position of Deputy Head of Office of Commissioner Liikanen, who was also actually very fond of European standardization, in charge of enterprise and industrial policy. And he has occupied, on top of that, several management positions. So, Monsieur COZIGOU, the floor is yours. He's going to introduce us the recently published European standardization strategy.
Thank you, Elena. As you said, I'm an economist, so I'm going to try to make that function because I'm not a technician. But okay. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you today. A lot has already been said, so I'll try not to only repeat what was said, but bring you a bit further in the strategy that the Commission adopted beginning of February. Et maintenant, je passe en français. Après tout, je suis régional de l'étape. Donc, nous avons adopté, la Commission, cette stratégie.
So the EU Commission adopted the standardization strategy because they hadn't been any such strategy in the past, and also wanted to define a clear strategy for standardization. As this has been said by Monsieur BRETON, this is a highly important issue from an economic and also from a strategic point of view. And I must say that we were very pleased to see that it was broadly conveyed by the media, and it has benefited from a positive comments by almost all stakeholders, and even those who made some critical comments with regards to this strategy have highlighted that standardization was being seen as something that was important, and that standardization was now going to be the heart of the EU policies and strategies. I would like to congratulate the organizers because they chose the title of this conference. It says an ambitious EU standardization strategy for a sovereign and green Europe. Just like the digitalization of our economy, standardization is seen as something that is important. Obviously, standardization and this strategy cover other aspects also, but the three pillars, and green transition, digital transition, and sovereignty are the three main pillars of that strategy. So before I talk about the measures and the package that was published back in February, I would like to remind you that European standardization is a success story indeed. So we're not here to throw the baby out with the bathwater, that we're going to do things much better now. No, we are building up on a successful approach already. But based on that success, we want to get ready for future challenges, challenges that we're already faced with and challenges to come. Standards are the invisible cement of the European market. The European single market are the jewels of the crown jewels. Well, we don't use that expression so much now since Brexit, but the foundation of that EU legislation is the harmonized standardization effort, because those harmonized standards are seen as almost pieces of legislation. It facilitates greatly the work carried out by the industrial companies. So is this working? Oh, good, perfect. So European standards play an essential role. They are drafted based on a system that is quite specific. As EU regulation is decided upon by politicians, but standards are drafted by the public authorities and also the private bodies via the European standardization bodies. And those online standards, once they have been published, provide this presumption of conformity with EU legislation. Right now, we have 3,600 harmonized standards that support more than 23 pieces of legislation with regards to the single market. And we have to maintain those standards and make sure that we amend them and have this corpus evolve according to evolving needs. So, as Mr. Commissioner Breton said earlier this morning, we have realized that the strategic importance or significance of standards had been neglected for some time, whereas others were doing exactly the opposite, and they were investing in their standardization efforts. The world is changing, the environment is changing rapidly, and if we do not act rapidly, we'll not be up to those industrial changes that we will be faced with. I'm thinking about microchips, for example, and our fundamental values could be threatened, they could be put at risk if we are not more proactive in this standardization effort, especially in the digital world. In the past, we had more or less thought that Europe would be strong when it comes to standardization. But what we are seeing now, especially when it comes to new and emerging technologies, non-European companies are becoming more and more influential. In the current geopolitical environment, either we simply follow suit or we act as leaders in order to set out our own EU standards. As was said, the Chinese are being extremely proactive. I would like to remind you of the fact that last year in 2021, they published their own Chinese standardization strategy. And this strategy has a very clear objective, which is that to play a preponderant role when it comes to standardization at the global level. There are many new standards that are being released, especially in disruptive technologies, which should be of concern to us. We are seeing this happening in many international bodies. This could have some economic repercussions, but also it could put some of our values at risk. For example, when it comes to face recognition, biometrics, we clearly do not see things in the same way as the Chinese do. Data privacy is a good example of that also. There are also some discussions that are underway with regards to the future internet protocol, and the Chinese want to shape the future of the internet that is currently being covered within a multilateral framework. So we are really talking about our data privacy and our privacy values. So we need to act as leaders. We shouldn't be only in a defensive mode, and this is what we've been trying to do. In order to do this, we have to live up to the challenges that we are currently faced with. To begin with, I will mention two of them. Agility first, we have to be agile because of the pace of innovation. Unfortunately, standardization efforts come in too late, whereas private bodies, often non-European bodies, have acted faster, much faster than us. And we are not always able, or we're actually rarely able to produce works that are really timely. The second problem is that of the fact that we do not anticipate enough, and we are not able to set the right priorities. We have set clear and ambitious targets with the Green Deal, and standards will play an important role in achieving the targets in the Green Deal, especially with regards to CO2 emissions. And the same goes for the digital transition. So it's up to us to set our rules, and we'll have to prioritize things. So what are our proposals? This standardization strategy is based on 5 pillars. The first being anticipation, priority setting, and adaptation. As I said, we need to adapt standards more rapidly. We need to have a proper European agenda, and we need to innovate. As of this year, the standardization priorities will be clearly defined in the PEUWP. On the 2nd of February, we actually published 4 documents: the annual report, the strategy as such, the amendment to the standardization regulation that was mentioned earlier on, and we'll come back to that regulation later on, and also the annual work program. For the first time, there are 2 parts. The first part reminding of our political priorities in terms of standardization, and the second part that has to do with business as usual activities, because we still have to carry out our daily tasks. We have also examined existing standards in order to find out what priorities we have in terms of environmental protection and resilience. We have also decided to implement an excellence hub. The forum didn't exist last year, and the Commission had to define its own priority. This is why we have decided to set up a high-level forum to assist in prioritization and anticipation of needs. We have members from the member states, from the standardization bodies, from the industry, and also from civil society. Those members will be selected based on a call for interest. Specialized groups will also work on those specific issues, and this high-level forum should be launched in the fall, and I will spare you the technical details. There's also a new function that was created on the 1st of June. It's called Chief Standardization Officer. There isn't any good French translation, so if you have any suggestions, I'll be happy to hear those suggestions. And even Commissioner BRETON has given up on finding a good French word for this. So it's called Chief Standardization Officer in French also. And that person will be in charge of a high-level rotation setting. And this role will be held by my DG, RUTE. Some of you have met in Prague. And the Chief Standardization will be in charge of setting out and structuring the priorities at the level of the EU Commission. So this Chief Standardization Officer will work together with Commissioner BRETON within this high-level forum in order to supervise the work carried out at the forum levels, in order to make sure that the decisions made can properly be translated into actions. We will also put together an EU Excellence Hub called Excellence in French. This is currently being designed. In order to avoid any misunderstanding, some people have asked about this Excellence Hub. Is this going to be competing with standardization organizations? And I would like to reassure you, this is not the purpose of this Excellence Hub. This is something that is going to be within the EU Commission. We have lots of colleagues that work in standardization at the EU Commission. And we have EU civil servants who work in standardization. And I was quite surprised to realize that they didn't necessarily know each other. So it will also be aimed at coordinating the various efforts, and HEP will also be in charge of a database, a toolbox, in order to allow for a better cooperation amongst ourselves, but also with the stakeholders. So the aim is to provide more consistency and more efficiency. The second pillar is about good governance and the integrity of the European standardization system. The main principle being that European standards support EU-ization. They are quasi-PCOs and they have to be endorsed by the Europeans. Now, the Americans do not ask us to draft laws, and for them, the same goes for the Chinese. This is why we wanted to improve the governance of the European system. The decisions pertaining to standardization requests that are addressed to ESOs will have to be made by the national ESOs. By member states, we mean members of the European Economic Area. We want to avoid any external influence on the decision-making process. So let me add one thing. Everyone is more than welcome to take part in those efforts, but when it comes to development and adoption of standards, this will be done by the members of the European Economic Area. Also, the Commission will pay close attention to the participation of SMEs and civil society in the drafting process, and we're going to ask them to make some proposals in order to make sure they are included in this process and involved. We will also start reviewing the regulation 1025, and this should begin sometime next year. Let me also reaffirm that we are really committed to the European standardization system. That as a public institution, we have to have a fallback option, a safety net, if you will, via sectoral legislation in order to define technical specifications if the system were not to work in an efficient manner. In other words, if it were not producing standards in a timely fashion. Third pillar, we want to enhance our European leadership in global standardization. We want to work via the high-level forum and implement a new mechanism with the member states and the national standardization bodies in order to share information, to better coordinate our approach, and to strengthen our influence. Our purpose is also to make sure that we cooperate better with external partners, with like-minded third parties. This started with the TTC, the Technology and Trade Council, with our US partners. There is a cooperation chapter on topics of common interest, and a second chapter on strategic issues, the purpose being to identify shared priorities at the international level. We also would like to have an alert mechanism in place if we were to see non-positive outcomes. And last but not least, we also want to work together with partner countries and finance standardization projects in partner countries in the neighborhood, especially in Africa and in other neighborhood countries. Fourth pillar, innovation and next generation standards. We want to better valorize innovation projects through standardization activities, and we want to have standardized organizations and researchers work more closely together. Within Horizon 2020, we will make sure that researchers have the possibility to test the relevance of standardization, and we're also going to draft a code of practice for researchers in order to strengthen the relation between standardization and research. This will be adopted during the second half of this year.
And finally, the preparation of future. We need experts. And what we are seeing is that our standardization community, which is large, is an aging community and is not doing very well. This can even have impacts on standards, such as safety standards. We have too many men, and this could be considered as a bias. We have to factor in half of global population. So we want reach out sessions for younger people. We want to work at university with the member states and you, the experts in standardization. I was too long, but I wanted to give you an overview of what we intend to do.
And sorry for the pressure, because I know there is a lot to say. I don't think we have time for questions from the audience because we really need to respect this very tight schedule. But we're going to elaborate a lot about this presentation from the Commission with the three key leaders to implement and to support the implementation of the European standardization strategy. So I'm going to invite to join me on the stage the chair of the ETSI General Assembly, Neviana NIKOLOSKI, the CEN President, Stefano CALZOLAR, and the CENELEC President, Wolfgang NIEDZIELLA. And I'm going to change seats so that they can sit together. So let me guide you during the next 30 minutes on a, I'm sure, passionate discussion about standardization. Let me also thank our host, the Presidency of the Union, France, but also our French member, AFNOR, because they have organized a really timely event to deal with the European standardization. And it's a pleasure also to have all the friends of standardization and the future friends of standardization, because we hope also that this event managed to engage those that maybe are not convinced or maybe that are not so familiar with European standardization. We heard this morning from the AFNOR president, from the commissioner, that we have gone in the span of a few months with the worst sanitary crisis in a century to managing a sustainable and inclusive recovery for all, up to degrading security environment at the borders of Europe with a war in Ukraine. This has certainly impacted and is still impacting our economy, our society, and our ways of life to levels we never saw before, at least for me. After a historic COVID-driven recession, which we strive to leave on our backs, we are now all aware of the record high fuel prices, the worrying risk of stagflation, the threats to derail once again all the efforts that we were making. To all that, we need to add the challenge of climate change, which is really the most formidable challenge for our and the next generation. So we really need to rethink on our system. We cannot go in doing business as usual. This is not possible. And we have embarked all together in this path of transformation with the objective to achieve the digital and the twin transition. And yet the foundations for a resilient, strategically autonomous European economy. We heard all of that this morning. So here we are today with people that can make the change, at least can support the change. And it's a privilege to be able to coordinate and facilitate this discussion. So in the next now 25 minutes, We will try to answer the questions of what are the perspectives of the European Standards Organization, CEN, CENELEC, and ETSI on the new European standardization strategy. Are we ready to meet the challenges? How the European standardization system is going to evolve to contribute to achieving the objectives of the twin transition. So I have the pleasure of introducing first Neviana NIKOLOSKI, the chair of the ETSI General Assembly. I had some presentations. Maybe I can say that Neviana has a very, very long and outstanding experience in standardization. She's actually manager regulatory affairs in TQM and IPR at Sonova. And she's leading the international regulatory activities in the field of electromagnetic compatibility, radio spectrum matters, short-range devices, and medical devices safety. So very broad expertise. Then I would like to introduce the same president, Stefano CALZOLAR, and civil engineer and entrepreneur. We can see that every day, those that work with him on a recurrent basis. So Mr. Stefano CALZOLAR is the founder of and the general manager of SCLI Ingegneria Strutturale, and that is also an SME with a team of 22 professionals. He's the president of Milan's Order of Engineers and has been a member of the board of the National Council of Engineers. So thank you very much, Stefano, for being with us today. He was elected CEN president from 2022 to 2024. And of course, he started the 1st of January 2022. And our third guest today is Wolfgang NIEDZIELLA, president of CENELEC, trained engineer. We have a lot of engineers in the European standardization system. And Mr. NIEDZIELLA has been head of Digital Safety Center of Competence at FPEU, which is the German Association for Electrical and Electronic and Information Technologies. He has had a very broad experience on conformity assessment because he has also chaired the ICE scheme, which is dealing with electrotechnical equipment and components. It's also important his experience as change manager in a bank, which is also bringing a lot of new ideas. Some of them may be disruptive to the European standardization system. And he has been elected as the CENELEC president for a period of 3 years, 22 to 24, and he started his mandate in 2022. So let's start with our discussion, and I would like to make a question to the three of you. And the first to answer, I would like to be Neviana, if that is possible. So how are the challenges of today impacting CEN, CENELEC, and ETSI looking ahead? Is the European standardization system experiencing a deep and maybe disruptive transformation to support sustainable growth? Because we need sustainable growth. So, Neviana, please.
Thank you very much, Elena. Hope it works. Yes. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank also AFNOR and the French Presidency for organizing this important conference today and for discussing these important issues. Concerning the three ESOs for ETSI and also for CEN and CENELEC, I would like to say that we are welcoming the emphasis on standardization as a strategic tool for EU policy and competitiveness. We were asking for this since years, and we are finally happy to see that finally the key role which standards play in achieving strategic autonomy and also technological sovereignty is recognized in Europe. From there on, I would like to say that till now, in fact, we are actually well aligned in the process of standards making for compliance with EU policies and legislation. And the reason is very simple. When the three ESOs have to work on a standard, for example, if we take the standard on accessibility, which is being currently recognized worldwide as a leading standard in this area, we have to work using one process of developing a standard and then approving the standard by the national standardization organizations. So this we have aligned as ESOs since years. And I was a little bit surprised to hear by the commissioner that in fact, one ESOs can be excluded from work on standards, for example, on the cybersecurity area, where we know that all members are developing the standard, regardless whether we are talking about CEN, CENELEC, or ETSI the same way. And the NSOs, the EU NSOs are approving it when we have to deliver a standard for compliance with EU policies and legislation. We will discuss a little bit later afterwards about the inclusiveness and participation. Here we have really a serious concern on ETSI's side. That's really a challenge. And we will hear afterwards some more words from my colleagues on inclusiveness. So now we have to see how ETSI experts from SMEs can join CEN and CENELEC in order to be able to contribute, because currently they're excluded. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neviana, for giving us this very personal opinion and maybe ETSI opinion on these deep changes, disruptions that are happening in ETSI. Stefano, can you please describe what is happening in CEN and how we are experiencing the current situation and how we can contribute to sustainable growth?
Yes, Elena, thank you. This situation not as a painful break with the past. I consider this situation, on the contrary, as an occasion, a challenge, a very interesting challenge to modernize our system in the future. Of course, our navigation is difficult today. The sea, let me make this analogy, is not flat as it was in some past years. We have a lot of waves in front of us. First, the pandemic, then the unexpected and sad war in Ukraine, with all its implications, including the economical implications. But my feeling is that our boat is strong, because it is built on the same values of Europe, which are fundamental, identitarian values. I can mention, for example, human rights, human dignity, freedom, the democratic dialogue between all the components of the society, the participation of the citizen to the civil society, and all these values in our system becomes more inclusiveness, more transparency, more reliability, and also more attention to the future needs of our citizens and our stakeholders, of our global market, we can say. And for this reason, I feel optimistic, because I have seen a very good reaction in this difficult period. And we are doing a lot of developments in areas which are completely new, really innovative. And we are also trying to make new investments. Otherwise, everybody knows the best period to make investments is during crisis. usually, if you choose the right direction. And we are very happy to be in a very good relationship with the European Commission. We are fully in line with their new standardization strategy, and our objective in strategy 2030 are, I repeat once more, in line. And to be concrete, for example, and I know there is no time, so I have to finish. I want to only to speak about the national delegation principle. We fully agree with this. I think it is a very important opportunity to have the best representative and experts aboard in our many technical committees and working groups, without waiving any specific contribution we may have, but at the same time taking care of widespread interest. That means at the end of the day, to have benefits for everybody in the society.
Thank you, Stefano. That was really a strategic and visionary. And Wolfgang, what do we need to add from the CENELEC perspective?
Yes, third speaker, it's always difficult not to repeat what has said because we have all the same questions. So I can fully underline what Stefano said. And I think the global challenges we have faced and also will face the next 2 years, they are really very good mirrored in the strategy of the European Commission for our standardization field. And it recognizes completely the European values of standardization. I think that is very important, the European values of standardization. For sure, it's a big ambition for the transition, and also it phases on sustainability and digitalization. These are two topics. That is very important. And speaking for CEN and CENELEC, and allow me to speak for both organizations because we have done something before the European strategy was published. It's our strategy, the CEN and CENELEC strategy, which was published in advance. And in this strategy, we are sure, and we clearly say that standards can and will play a huge role in contributing to a more sustainable future in Europe. And I must say that we are proud that our community have proven agile and flexible enough to meet these challenges and to improve our system. And we have still some activities started. As I mentioned, our strategy is a little bit older than the European one. And in our strategy, we have different let me say, key paths defined. And these 5 priorities at the end, they are underlined with several of our projects. And there are different activities behind. One for the digitalization area is for sure the digital standard. But not only the standard is digital in future, also the process for defining standards will become more digital. But both is very important that we don't do it for ourselves. We have to do it for our stakeholders and for the customers of the standards at the end. That means we have also to look clearly to the user needs, which is also another topic we have in our strategy. And for sure, increasing diversity of our organizations was also a discussion last week in our General Assemblies in Prague with the young professionals is one of the topics we have to address. But I think for all of us, that's a journey we have now started. It's a journey for all these changes, modifications, and for all these challenges, definitely. But CEN and CENELEC, we have clearly committed us to provide the European industry with the necessary tools and power for all these activities. And I think we have shown also in the past that we are able to do this, because topics like artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, or industrial data, we still have handled and have produced standards. So why not also for further topics to do this? And at the end, let me say, we as CEN and CENELEC are very close together. And this shows also that we have a common strategy, well knowing that we are not always the same opinion within the electrical and electrical field. That's clear, but we are very close to the European strategy. And for sure, if we get a chance also in future to communicate closely with the Commission, then we are able to fulfill also their strategy for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang. I think that we need to be very optimistic. Our three chairs are really willing to work together and committed to have a very constructive contribution on how standards can enable sustainable growth for Europe. And that's what we all need. We heard when talking about the 5 pillars of the European standardization strategy. And again, we are a little bit short of time, but I would like to deep dive a little bit on these 5 pillars. And I will take 3 questions for the chairs, which we will try really to cover what is it that we are doing in more practical basis to support those pillars. And the first one goes to, we have heard a lot about the process, the system need to become more agile, more flexible. We need to focus on anticipating standardization needs. We need to deliver in a timely manner. I think we have been working a lot about that. So Neviana, what do we need to do to make the system more efficient and ready to take the first mover advantage for our industry? This is something that we have also heard a lot today.
Yes, thank you, Elena. So here I would like to go to the good part of our public-private partnership with the Commission and the excellent work which we are doing in the task force on timely development of standards for green and digital economy. And this task force was already mentioned in the EU industrial strategy. And now under the first pillar, we continue the work and actually the concerted approach on improving the rules which we have and the whole process of standard setting in Europe. And we are working in 2 work streams, depending on whether there is existing EU legislation or whether there is no EU legislation in place, especially when we are talking about new and emerging technologies. And when there is no existing legislation, we are working on a process how we can do in parallel the development of the legislation and also of the standards to be really ready with new innovative products. When the legislation is ready, we have the standards and we can enable the industry or the societal stakeholders to be able to really see the new products on the market immediately. In the case where we have already EU legislation in place, we are looking at the current processes, what we can improve, where we can gain time in order to really shorten the time of the standards development and ensure in the meantime that the standards after publication can be cited in the official journal and then used for presumption of conformity for placing products on the market. So I would like to say that here we have extremely good cooperation, excellent cooperation with the Commission, and we have seen that when we know the processes, we can work really in a very good collaboration together. And this also gives us an opportunity to have a critical view on our own processes and to see what we can improve. For example, when we go to the standardization package and the proposed amendment, we have seen in particular in ETSI that we can change our processes for approval and acceptance or rejection of standardization requests, which we have never had to do in the past because we have rejected only one standardization request in our history. But now, of course, we see the merits of this new proposal, and at the next General Assembly, we are going to propose to the members to improve our rules in order to make them more democratic and according to the EU values.
Thank you, Neviana. I think the easier the system works, the better for the experts to understand it. But okay, this is a personal opinion of the moderator. So, Stefano, I think that it's also very important to touch upon innovation, young professionals, and we have heard that the European leadership depends on the innovation capacity of our industry. There is untapped potential in bringing research, innovation, and standardizers closer together and engaging the next generation of the standards makers. We really need to attract more sectors, younger people, different people, and to get the understanding of the values of standardization. And we need to pay careful attention to inclusiveness, which is really an asset of the European standardization system. So, how can we ensure better deployment of innovation through standards and ensure inclusiveness and future standardization expertise in the European standardization system?
Okay, I think that it's better to start from the introduction to your question. I think that research and innovation is not only an interesting word because we see the future, is key to success, especially if we want to achieve our most ambitious goals. The green transition, the digital transitions are very ambitious goals. But before going on to answer your question, let me make another analogy, a kind of metaphor. Yesterday, traveling by plane to Paris, I thought that our standardization system could be considered as the landing gear of many technical and also not technical plans. In other words, ideas, projects, even political strategies and direction need to land into the society in order to become practical application for the life of the citizens. So everybody needs good wills to do it. But continuing the analogy, when the project have a very high content of innovation at the utmost frontiers of knowledge, the airplane is very high in the sky, and we cannot land immediately. We need some specific procedures governed by the control room, the control tower, and the control tower in this example is the European Commission. And this special procedure in this analogy are in our system the pre-normative activities. In order to prepare these pre-normative activities, we have to involve a lot, hundreds of experts, researchers, and innovators together with the standardizers. And we are doing this. We are putting a lot of efforts to have a more efficient CCMC and the whole organization. I think the people of research and innovation today are really connected well with our organization. And I can only say that I am very happy. We have renewed at the beginning of this year the relationship with JRC, the European Joint Research Center, very, very important. We are happy also that our initiative, putting science into standards, has been fully recognized in the new strategy of the European Commission. I can give you a lot of examples. I can speak about the artificial intelligence, for example, but I think we have no time, unfortunately.
Unfortunately not. I was just in the hands of Christina. I was asking her if we can stay for 5 more minutes. We just need to address another important challenge that had been, or pillar that had been addressed, and that is the international standardization. So in the strategy, it is written, setting global standards in support of a resilient, green and digital single market. So the objective here is to shape the European standardization so that we can ensure European leadership at global level. Wolfgang, I know that you like this subject. What are the ESOs doing in order to get more standards takers, more standards makers and not standards takers, as we have heard several times by Commissioner BRETON? How can ensure this European leadership in the international standardization system and in the global market?
Thank you for this question, Elena. But please allow me to say one sentence to the statement of Stefano. And we both are very happy that last week in the General Assemblies of our organizations, the members have agreed to invest in such projects to bring things forward, which means more money on the table for all at the end, but also the benefit at the end. That is very important. So the members of CEN and CENELEC are willing to invest in this future. But coming back to your question, I think we are all aware that that European standardization is fine, and we are definitely number ones in Europe in standardization, but that will not help. We have to be also number one internationally at the end, and to become also a global leader was also requested by Mr. BRETON. Global leader in the sense, from my perspective, not that everything what we are doing is the best in the world, no, that our values are brought to international level, the European values, that this is very important, and for sure, European technology, no doubt. And at the end, this will be a key with international organizations, because with this approach, we can really reduce the technical barriers to trade. And especially speaking for the electrotechnical part, it's definitely only international market. There is no small market, it's only the world market. That's the only point. What we have done, both organizations, and for sure we have long-lasting experience with our counterparts internationally, that's ISO and IEC, we have agreements with them, the Vienna Agreement and the Frankfurt Agreement. And that's a very, very good basis, for sure, on one side, to cooperate, on the other side, to have harmonized processes to make also standardization from the international level faster for all of us and coordinated. That is very important. And for sure, we want to keep this partnership and also to modernize this and to improve it also, especially in the digital world. That means on the digital side in our IT systems, because we cannot have at the end a digital European standard, a digital international standard, because then we have the problem that our stakeholders cannot fit with this. And that we can influence at the end the international level shows a new approach from European Standards Organization, the All Electric Society at IEC, for example. The All Electric Society, which is an approach. And let me give you a very short definition for those who don't know it. A world in which sustainable generated electrical energy is a primary form of energy and is available worldwide economically. To reach this, it's an approach from Europe to the IEC, and they added it to their project plans. So you can see how we can influence also international standardization. We are doing it.
So you can see that we are in a very good hands here. Just to conclude this really exciting and passionate discussion, I would like that the three chairs give us in one sentence, what is their wish for European standardization? So, and now we will reverse the order. So Wolfgang, you start. Wish, one sentence, timely delivery.
One wish is to less. When I was young, my wish list was very, very long, especially for Christmas.
One.
So, for Europe, that we can really realize our European strategy and that we can close cooperate with the Commission to reach all these goals we have on both sides, on the Standards Organization as well as on the Commission side. And internationally, if the All Electric Society becomes true, this vision, then we have solved a lot of problems, not only on standardization side. Thank you.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Stefano.
An internal wish is to try to attract and engage young professionals in our environment, because we need their brain. Their brain are fit for the future. This is a hope also related to the fact that this year is the youth year, 2022. I have also an external wish to be leader worldwide, but not because we are too much proud of ourselves, but because of the high quality of our products and standards. This is my view.
Thank you very much, Stefano. And Neviana.
Thank you very much. Well, my wish is that the Commission trusts our experts in the development of European standards with a global impact for the benefit of all.
So a big applause for our committed guest. Thank you. And back to Christine.
Un grand merci à Neviana.
So thank you so much, Neviana, NIKOLOSKI, Wolfgang, NIEDZIELLA, and Stefano CALZOLAR. We are now going to move to a roundtable. So no time for the Q&A. We are behind schedule. I think we had been a bit too optimistic. Sorry about that. So we're going to move directly to our roundtable number 1 on critical raw materials. Here we go. So as you know, the standardization strategy has reaffirmed the fact that Europe had to be more sovereign. There are many topics involved, vaccines, the decarbonization of the industry, hydrogen, amongst others. We have decided to talk about critical raw materials this morning, and I will invite Christophe Poinceau, Grégoire Jean, and Eric Petit.
Alors, Christophe Poinceau, vous êtes directeur.
So, Christophe Poinceau, you are Directeur Général at BRGM, Bureau de Recherche Géologique et Minière.
Un métal stratégique.
So, what is a strategic metal? What do we mean by this? Thank you.
Donc, nos économies aujourd'hui, on en a largement parlé dans cette matinée.
So, we've talked about this morning. Our economy is going to be faced with major transformations, the environment, the digital economy, and we will need huge quantities of metals to achieve this. The difference
précédente, c'est à la fois qu'on va
now is that we're going to mobilize larger quantities of metals, but we're also going to use different types of metals. We will have to purify those, which will be a major challenge. So how are we going to supply all those metals? Bear in mind that we are in a very specific situation. We rely very much on imports. On the right, you have a graph that gives you the share of imports at the EU level. And for some of those elements, so the percentage is 100%. We're talking about countries that play a big role, such as China in red. As for other metals, things are slightly less critical. But what this means is that in order to be resilient, we will have to make sure that we have the right supply in some of the strategic metals.
C'est-à-dire ceux sur lesquels on est.
There are some critical raw materials that for which we face supply shortages in the short term. So this is the Mendeleev table for the chemical elements that can be found on Earth. Those that are colored are the ones that we need for our economy. As you can see, they account for most of the chemical elements that are on this table. Those in blue are useful by energy transition, the green ones for the digital transition, and more than 50% of them are both colors, because there is some overlap between those two main sectors. And some of them are extremely critical. They are in red. We're talking about lithium, nickel, cobalt for batteries, rare earth for magnets, windmills. So all those elements have to be supplied, and we need secured supply chains. So what are the issues for the European industry when it comes to availability and quality? Well, all this is indispensable for our future. We need to roll out good solutions in order to become more resilient and to be more sovereign, economically speaking. So when it comes to those metals, the supply chains are extremely complex, but we really need people who are experts in order to have a good understanding of the value chains with transformation steps, stages, multiple transformation stages or processing stages. So this has to be developed at the national, European level. And I would like to also mention the fact that the government is currently implementing a national observatory on the critical metals. Second, we have some resources, for example, old products, and it's important to focus on recycling, and we shouldn't be naive. No, those recycling plants have to be built. We need to have a recycling value chain, but this is not the only solution, because we are talking about all the products that do not necessarily use as much rare raw materials as the new ones. So this will not cover our entire need. We have to develop new resources. Some of the resources are to be found on our national territory and also on the European territory. So one of the issues will be to redeploy a mining industry in the European Union, but this will not cover all our needs either. And we will have to rely on imports also, but in a more limited way, hopefully. And this is why we work on carrying out some diplomatic efforts in order to procure those rare minerals. And what about standardization? Well, we will have to guarantee that those new mines, those new extraction industries are environmentally friendly, that they are complying with the latest standards. We also need to have all the populations on board. This is about responsible mining. And we cannot only focus on Europe, because some of the imports will bypass all those rules, and we need to have a global standardization effort. And some initiatives are currently being undertaken in order to do this. Let's not forget about quality issues, and I'm sure that my colleagues will talk about those specific aspects. So thank you, Grégoire Jean, your OD Director for Lithium Projects at Imerys. This is a French company specialized in the transformation of minerals. Well, as you've just said, Imerys is now extracting some lithium. There are several projects underway, one of them in France. It's not a thermal mine, just like our thermic colleagues or counterparts. It's a mineral mine in the Allier department under a kaolin mine. So we extract lithium. Lithium is an indispensable metal for green mobility. This is a market that is going to be multiplied by 7 by 2030. And those batteries that are being used require extremely pure lithium. And we are seeing that various stakeholders from the value chain do not necessarily speak the same language. There are two types of analysis or detection methods, and the impurity levels might differ depending on the method that you use. And this can be an issue. And the Chinese have identified this as being an issue. They launched a major lithium initiative, and we joined that initiative together with some French colleagues via AFNOR, but also via other European colleagues that have also I understood the impact of standardization for lithium, and also that it is important to be united and in order to be active when it comes to reacting to the decisions made by China and Australia. So what is your position in this landscape then? Well, quite clearly, our approach is to really find a joint position together with our colleagues or counterparts. This is quite easy to achieve in France, but also within the EU, with the Germans, with the people in Finland, the Portuguese, etc., because there is some convergence here. We are very much so focused on the analytics. We try to be constructive. Our colleagues from Eramet are part of concrete working groups, and other working groups are going to be launched, and they will be led by French people and the other Europeans. So we should make sure that standardization isn't a weapon that is going to distort competition. In Europe, we have a standard. We have rules, regulations, and voluntary standards that provide for high quality products, so for good working conditions and for the protection of the environment. So when it comes to lithium, we want to have a responsible mining. This is unfortunately being right now led by Australia and China, which are not necessarily the country that impose the fiercest rules and standards. So we have to be really extremely demanding, and we have to make sure that we can push our European standards. Yes, let's make sure that there isn't any greenwashing when it comes to those international standards. So thank you. Eric Petit, you're the CEO of a company called Maive. You offer solutions in order to secure the supply in rare earth magnets for high-tech companies. What kind of metals are we talking about? Well, I'm here to represent rare earth magnets. When we talk about critical metals, I'm really at the very end of the supply chain, and our main issue is that we very much depend on the supplies from Asia and China, be it for rare earth, but also be it for processing. But we need them throughout our products. So those are some of the examples of where those magnets are being used when it comes to sovereignty. We have to mention defense, but also electric vehicles, windmills. We are really talking about major challenges. Rare earth, cobalt also is critical to us. So unfortunately, those metals are highly critical, and we very much depend on our future. So what about standardization? What is the issue here? Well, we see three main aspects: the industrial part, the economic part also. Well, as for the industrial aspect, when it comes to magnets, there's nothing in Europe really. And we are really asking for this to change, but we are a tiny actor. We can say that the Chinese are investing in this field. They have the financial resources to do so, and they have the political will, and we have no plants, no industry in Europe to manufacture those magnets. And this has to change. There's another technological aspect. We are not going to be able to develop our defense industry, our car manufacturing industry, if we only have a copy and paste approach. We have to innovate also. This is our role. And in order to push for innovation, we have to make sure that standards are there. We want also the industries to be there. We need to develop new magnets. And companies need a framework, and that framework is missing right now. this creates lots of uncertainties, and this is the reason why earlier on we talked about various tests that can be carried out that can lead to the different outcomes. So there's a big void right now, and we need to improve on this, and customers have to know what they are buying. So those metals are not so easy to supply. I believe we hear a lot about recycling instead of producing. So what are the solutions that can be provided for by standards? Well, I'm not necessarily a great fan of a recycling standards, but I'm certain that standards can improve things when it comes to recycling. My colleague from BRGM said, and I agree with him, it's about finding the right timeline. Because we are talking about the future, but the future is just around the corner, and we're talking about 10 years from now. But as for recycling, we need very short-term, very quick solutions in order to make sure that we become more autonomous when it comes to supplying those rare earths. But recycling will not be the single solution. We'll have also to find other resources in order to fully become independent and autonomous. Well, thank you to all three of you. I don't know if people in the audience would like to ask a question to one of our speakers. Well, if there are, oh yes, it seems there is one question over there.
Merci bien, Patrick Dumière. Je préside la commission.
Patrick Dumière. I'm in charge of the Standardization Commission on Sustainable Development. I have a very simple question. How are you working on this responsible mining aspect? Because we've been hearing a lot about this, but what about the relevant standard? Well, I will answer.
La stratégie
at IMIRIS, our strategy when it comes to responsible mining is not something that I work on personally because I work on lithium, but we have some people within our company that look at the various options when it comes to standards. It could be an ISO standard, but it could also be other types of rules that are not actual official standards, such as IRMA. So what would be the right balance? What would be the most flexible tool or the most binding tool?
Parce qu'on voit effectivement
we believe that because as we can see this with lithium, that many countries are trying to gain control over standardization at ISO, and if nothing changes, we could use standards drafted by civil society that is more demanding. They might be harder to comply with, but they would put pressure on our competitors. For example, Australia and China. I mean, this is not something that we have clearly made our minds on, but we are thinking about this. But maybe I could add one or two things. What I'm saying is that, and this was mentioned by the other gentleman, there are lots of initiatives for each kind of metal, I would say, which means that there are many fora in which those topics are being discussed, but there is a lack of communication and consistency, and we do not see any single or global concept emerge, and this needs to be tackled. Plus, those standards have a dual objective. First, we want to make sure that environmental and social standards are being complied with, but we also have to make sure that our citizens are convinced about the benefits of such standards. And I do not necessarily believe that ISO or AFNOR standards would be sufficient. We need to make sure that society is also on board because they could provide an additional approach, and they could also complement the standardization efforts. Okay, thank you for your answers. This was indeed really interesting, and I suggest that we move on to roundtable number 2.
Alors, un autre axe de progression qui a été fixé par la stratégie européenne de normalisation,
this was another focus of the European strategy, the interactions between innovation, research, and standardization. I will now invite Joanne Gouache, who is online. Hopefully, we have Corinne Hubert-Santo, and I will ask Corinne to come up on stage also. She's Director of Evaluation at CEA. We have Stéphane Panetra, Chairman and Founder of Art5, and Vincent Laflèche, Director of Mines ParisTech, same President also until 2019.
Alors, on va démarrer avec Joanne Gouache.
So we're going to start with Joanne Gouache. So you are Director for Development and Public Programs at EURECAT in Spain, Barcelona. So Joanne, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Good morning.
Joanne, can you hear me?
We are glad to welcome you.
Très bien, on est ravis de vous entendre. Donc, Joanne, vous avez participé.
How will you consider the role of standardization in a research program?
Well, good morning, bonjour, buenos días. First of all, I apologize for not being able to be in Paris with all of you. And then thanks to AFNOR and also to UNE, the Spanish standardization body, to invite us to participate in this conference. And last but not least, also thanks to the European Commission to set up innovation as one of the pillars for the standardization strategy of Europe. For those who don't know us, EURECAT is the largest private research and innovation organization in Catalonia, in Spain. Our headquarters is located in Barcelona, and we employ over 700 researchers and technicians, but we are spread all over the region to be closer to the industries, which are mainly SMEs, as in all the countries in Europe, as well to the society. We participated in different European funded projects since a long time. And coming to the topic, standards and standardization were well known by our researchers and technicians since the beginning, since the origin, I think. But when we started to include a standardization as a backbone activity of the large research and innovation projects, we discovered other advantages, other added values, rather than the fulfillment, the compliance of the technical rules or standards. Some of them are illustrated in this slide. The first one is the access to the knowledge, to the key stakeholders. Because when you start to participate in meetings, when you start to talk with the standardization bodies and so on, then you realize that there is more knowledge than the one that is published or that is accumulated by the academics. The second is that it facilitates exploitation of the research project results, because it puts you in contact and it puts aware also of the users and the customers. So at the beginning of the research, you are already considering, you are already taking into account which are the needs, which are the limits, which are the restrictions, which are the technological barriers that are already in the daily activities, so in the daily actions. A third motivation is that it reduces the industrial scale time, because from the beginning you start to consider not only the technical rules, but you start to see which are the coming rules, which are the coming trends in terms of standardization. So you can be prepared to make the industrial scale up in a very short time. And let me stress that all of them are independent of the field of academics, the scientific field, or the knowledge field. we started these activities because of the FP7 Research EU program. And we start also, and we keep on doing this type of activities and consolidated these activities during the Horizon 2020. And for sure that for the Horizon Europe, we will continue by doing an increase and adding this type of activities in our large research activities. However, I would like to share my thought that we don't see a similar request or interest in the national or regional funding programs in our case. And I think that this is not a problem of Spain, but also from all the European countries. I think that there is another slide now.
Johan, we can't hear you any longer.
Hello, do you hear me?
RECAT is a Spanish research body which has worked in standardization again.
You come back, right?
Okay. Sorry for this.
No, it's a technical problem.
I was asking if you can move to the second slide.
Okay. So, what was your experience about integrating standardization in your research programs? What have been the advantages of such an approach?
Well, I would say that thank you. I would say that we started the relation, the communication with UNE, with the Spanish standardization body. And after being partners in several projects, now we have a permanent dialogue. We are collaborating in different activities, of course, in activities related with standards committees, with new standards and so on. And moreover than that, we are also sharing experiences related with innovation that can be transferred to the standardization, as well as on the vice versa way. So we have our also experts working with their committees, and we have seen also that by working like that, we have been able to internally start to establish new ways of doing things when you have to manage the research activities in a large organization like EURECAT is. Another important point is that it helps to disseminate the results because it clearly puts the framework of the applications. For instance, we are using quite often the CEN workshop agreements as a tool to disseminate, as a tool to share the experiences developed in a certain knowledge domain. And last, I would like also to share an example. For instance, I hope that you see my glasses, the glasses that I am wearing.
Yes.
They are made following a technology developed under an Horizon 2020 project. And we added the standardization activity to the work plan. And by doing this, we not only ensure that comply with the current standards, but also at that time, project finished in 2016. At that time, we also anticipate the compliance with the standard related with data management, data privacy, cybersecurity, and also artificial intelligence applied to the manufacturing of personalized products in general. By the way, if you want, you can buy it through the web or in a shop which is in Barcelona. Sorry for that. And I would like to conclude my intervention by stating that national standards organizations are, for us, for EURECAT, facilitators because they open us new opportunities to put the research results into the market. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johan, for participating in our conference and for this testimony. Thank you very much. Alors, je me tourne vers vous, Corinne. Corinne Hubert-Sainteau, vous êtes directrice.
Corinne Hubert-Sainteau, you are a director of evaluation at CA. What's the role of CA? Thank you, Christelle. Good morning, one and all. I'm going to try and show you my slideshow.
On n'a pas le retour sur l'écran, s'il vous plaît.
Voilà. I'd like to see the slides on the screen, please. There we are.
Donc, tout d'abord, L'innovation est au cœur des activités.
Innovation is at the heart of anything that we do at the CA. There are 4 pillars. There's defense and security of the country, then sources of power, fundamental research, and technological research. Innovation is also protected because what's dear to us is to file patents, CA patents, so that we can make sure that innovation is protected. And we're quite well rated, as you've seen this. We're the first research institution that's filed patents in France and the first research institution in France in Europe, first French research institution in Europe. That's how we're rated. The objective is to give value to what we do. We want to support the competitiveness of companies. We want to help people create jobs, and we want to keep our technological sovereignty. And therefore, standards such as API are a lever that we can use to give more value to what we do. This was recalled a minute ago. And at the CA, given our objectives, we address standardization, and it is enshrined in our 2021-2025 performance contract. The objective for us is to structure our input in the standardization bodies. What are the reasons? Well, as we said this morning, it's interesting for our industrial partners. It's also interesting for us, given our objective and mission. In doing that, we can take part in the setting up of new industrial sectors. We can facilitate access to markets, access of new technologies to markets. Sometimes they're stuck because they didn't anticipate. And also, it's a high-level watch-out for us, an observatory, so that we can keep an eye on the strategic industries. This goes hand in hand with the country strategy. We'll be increasing the numbers of people who use a given technology, and we'll be able to be more famous. Our reputation is going to increase, and our attractiveness as well. And we'll have more patents, and therefore we'll be more visible, which is what we want to do. Another focus of ours is to structure our approach, as I said earlier on, since we want to identify the key industries for us, and we want to address the 3 transitions: the energy transition, the digital transition, and that of future medical devices or medicine. So we do all this through our inputs in the standardization bodies. Now, what are the obstacles on your way when you work in standardization? Well, what we're doing is not yet sufficient. This was underscored this morning. As you know, the Germans are doing things faster than we are, not to mention China. They're very dynamic in IP and standardization. There are financial obstacles. Well, usually, as you know, money is the sinews of war. So this is costly for our researchers. It's costly to be on a technical committee. People have to travel as well, quite often. And that means quite a lot of expenses. And there's another dimension, which is the time notion. As we said this morning, you have to make sure that the experts are fully mobilized. And this sometimes clashes with their daily business. They have to supervise research work, they have to create inventions, they have to draw up patents, and they have to publish. And also they have to answer call for projects at national and international levels, and also factor in social and environmental requirements in their activities. So this comes in addition to the main activity that they have. So the rest, for the time being, unfortunately, is ancillary business for them. So I've taken due note of the fact that we now have a CSO, a Chief Standardization Officer. So in our department, we have someone as well who's in charge of that. And we're working on it. But of course, this weighs on the researchers, and our researchers are not necessarily fully aware of the issues at stake. So we have to work on that and work on all the benefits we can derive from European programs and the ones that have been launched. What do we need to do so as to improve? Well, there's a number of actions we can consider. Well, some of them have been launched already, but they have to be supported even more. As I was saying before, at a European level, there are opportunities. We have to advertise this. There are call for projects for Horizon 2020 with standardization chapters, if you will, that can get support. And there's another mechanism called the standardization booster. That's what I was discussing with my neighbor before the conference started this morning. And this standardization booster is a support we get from Europe. This is a great opportunity. We shouldn't miss it. And as we said this morning, there's training, there's awareness amongst researchers and their managers so that they have time enough to sit on the standardization bodies. Awareness for us leads to the setting up of seminars. We organize seminars and we talk about IP and standardization, but also we need to develop communication kits for the researchers. What we've also done is that we've organized a webinar with AFNOR for greater awareness, for people to be more aware of these challenges. This morning, we talked a lot about training and education, but there's also another dimension, which is to give the full value to standardization. It's as important as publications and patents. We have to make sure that all researchers are engaged and involved, which means we have to recognize and value the work they do in their careers. And we have to support the networks of experts, the experts who are fully mobilized. And also we have to facilitate access to AFNOR resources, which are essential. And finally, I must insist on the fact that people have to really work ahead of time, upstream. That is, when you're thinking about a project, you have to make sure that everybody's ready so that you're a driving force, because we have to anticipate, but also influence the course of events. And we have two experts at the CEA who were quite involved in a new committee that was set up by AFNOR on quantum technologies. Two experts that really show that the CEA wants to work ahead of time and anticipate and work on these key topics for us. That'll factor in the notion of standardization. Thank you very much, Corinne Hubert-Santo. Now, Stéphane Panetra, you're chairman and founder of ART-FI. Standardization for you is a tool you use to market your ideas. How is standardization useful for you? Thank you, AFNOR. Thank you, everybody. I'm very happy to be with you today. And the name of my company is ART-FI. We measure waves absorbed by human tissue when we use smartphones and connected devices. And that's for precision measurement. I'm very optimistic because what I've heard several times this morning is clear objectives, and you've taken stock of the situation. This is a very clear diagnostic. The diagnostic and the tools are clear, and therefore we think we have all that it takes to meet the major challenges tomorrow in the field of European standardization. And there's another point which I think is very important, and this is what I've seen in my company and other innovative SMEs to the south of Paris, in the town of Saclay. On these markets, there are technological breakthroughs, and therefore, we must think about standardization as early as we can. We have to anticipate, and that means we have to look at standards that are rolled out already when you enter these markets. If these standards are exclusive, you can perhaps realize that it'll take you a lot of time before you can change things. So I must insist on the importance of standards that focus on performance rather than the old standards that were focusing on technology. There's another idea I wanted to insist on, given what I heard this morning, which is that it's very important to have fresh outs and change our mindsets and change our culture. For instance, in my business, we've seen exclusive standards for 25 years, but now, as I said, we need to have performance-oriented standards, and that's the turnaround point. This is what we need to do to accelerate, speed up, and veer in a different way. And that's going to be based on women and men. The women and men who participate, researchers, chairpersons, heads of working groups, experts, or chief standardization officers representing SMEs or companies or participants. Everything is on their shoulders in the management chain so that we can meet the objectives. And today, this is something that has not fully happened. There's an awful lot that remains to be done to help and support the experts and the chairpersons so that they understand that we really need to change our standardization approach. Now, Stefan, is standardization something that SMEs can do? Well, yes, but if you look at my company, we have 34 people in my company, and we have 4 people who work full-time so as to take this turning point. This is essential for us so that we can go to market. 4 people, that's more than 10%. Many companies are not doing that, and they just abandon, or they try and overcome the difficulty in a different way. And for us, now the standard's being published, but it's not yet harmonized, which means it takes time between publication and harmonization of the standard. That's another key moment that we need to work on so that we could accelerate the whole process. Thank you very much, Stefan, for this. Thank you. This is an encouraging sign. We know it's not easy, but we think there's a lot to do. Vincent Laflèche, you work at Paris-Tech, director of MIN. You were head of BRGM as well, and another public organization. You were president or chairman at CEN. And during your presidency, there was a research and standardization plan that was adopted by CEN and CENELEC so as to give more importance to standardization in innovation research. Why did you decide to drop this plan in 2018? Well, thank you. Thank you. I only have 5 minutes. I know we're a bit late, but at MIN Paris, we are at the PSL University. We are now rated as top 30 global universities. We're the first one in Europe, well, post-Brexit, that is. Between 1994 to 1998 in Italy, I developed a startup subsidiary. This was based on the life cycle economy, and we apply to commodities and pollutants the works of Maurice Allais, who's a professor, a Nobel Prize of Economy, who was a teacher at the École des Mines de Paris and Polytechnique. EcoBilan, that's the name of the startup, in the 90s developed an experimental standard at AFNOR on the life cycle management. When the ESO work started, there were 2 documents on the table, the Canadian project and also the AFNOR project. And the ISO standard is more or less the same as the French experimental standard. The following year, EcoBilan became an international leader, not just a French leader, with a market share and revenues that were really high in Japan and in the US as well. So I think the link between research and innovation and commercialization and standardization is very clear. I have a second example that's very negative.
So France has also had some issues with the water quality standards, because when we say it has to be below 5 micrograms and the framework directive says below 2, when below the detection of special, what France said, so probably the beginning of the infringement procedure. So unfortunately, it stopped there, but below 5 is potentially greater than 2. So with new detection and measurement methods, not just about chromatography, it's also about having good sampling, good transport, good conditioning. This is about research, it's not patent, this is standardization. So this is something that François Jacques was faithful when he was in charge of. He had to meet with a French institution that assesses researchers. And this assessment, what the experts from HRS told the AFNOR experts that they were wasting their time because they were working on those well-paid although the French researchers are always looking for funds, because they were telling them that standardization work wasn't true research, that they were not acting as true researchers. And I believe this is one of the reasons why we have implemented this standardization and research plan that I implemented when I was in charge of CEN during a couple of years. So we have to know that the main objective of this plan was to speed up innovation, because we have seen a reduction in the time to market, and researchers have now to really act fast. And at the European level, we have approximately 50-50 share between public researchers and private researchers. So this plan was adopted at the General Assembly and led in 2018, if I remember well. So there are several aspects that have to do with when I was in charge of NIEDZIELLA. Now it's called the GPP. And they were expert researchers in order to be seen as international researchers in the management tool that I was in charge of at NIEDZIELLA. One of the main elements was that you had to be chairing a technical committee at the national level or a working group at the ISO level. So NIEDZIELLA were involved in 80 groups, 55 national groups, and 50% CEN and 50% CENELEC. So this was extremely well balanced. There was no issue. So these recognition issues are things that we see in the public sector, but also in the private sector. And it was quite costly. You know, we would receive 80,000 euros per year, but it would cost us 400,000 euros per year if you include all the parameters. And we had talked about this with our ministries at the time and various organizations and bodies, but this dates back 10 years now. So we also decided to work on speed. You know, time to market is of the essence here. So time between the consensus of the experts and the publication of standards used to be too long, you know, because you can't start from scratch based on national work when you want to publish an international or European standard. So one of the ways to improve on this was to value the work done at CEN for those are the CEN workshop agreements. If you have a document, because we're working on sustainable mining, for example, urban mining, if you have a pre-normative document such as the CEN workshop agreement, then you will be much faster by 2 years at least. So Thank you. This was extremely interesting, extremely important also. I'd like to thank you, all three of you, for your contributions. And we're now going to move on to the conclusion.
Merci à vous tous d'avoir suivi cette conférence.
Thank you for having watched this conference, or having listened to our speakers. Thank you to the speakers also. I'd like to thank the entire AFNOR team that has organized this event, Mathieu Cronier, Mrs. Miaville, Laetitia Cronier, and a few others. And I will now hand over the floor to Maive RUTE, who's going to make some closing remarks. Is the Chief Standardization Officer at DG. Maive RUTE, you have the floor. Is Maive RUTE with us? Is she still with us?
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we hear you. Thank you very much for being here with us.
So thank you for giving me the opportunity. As you said, the new Chief Standardization Officer recently given this new title, to share with you a few closing remarks of the event. Well, first of all, let me say I think it's really very good to see that standardization is one of the points that the French Presidency of the Council has taken really high in the political agenda, and is now having this event today as one of the events to close the Council Presidency. So it's really, I think, a perfect little dot on the I as to what the presidency has worked on and delivered. We have seen, of course, the new standardization strategy setting us a clear line as to what we are aiming at, what the future should be for the standardization in the European Union. You are well aware that the first task for us is to make the standardization system more efficient, faster, more responsive to priorities.
It seems that Zoom is not working so well today.
Improve the governance and integrity so that we support our single market. We create added value to the Union, and we really make sure that it is possible to deploy green and safe technologies which do not compromise on our values nor on our expectations. And there, of course, this standardization strategy is very much building on the well-established public-private partnership, which is taking the industry competence very much as a basis of our standardization organization's work. So this is something we want to value and take it forward, make it function even better. We then have, of course, in the strategy, this very important element of making sure that we stay firm when we are replying to the assertiveness of third countries in the field, and in addressing the necessary changes coming from significant geopolitical shifts happening over the last few years, and of course not forgetting what is going on in our neighborhood in Ukraine, so that our industries would not suffer competitive disadvantages, but rather the other way around. We would be strong in setting international standards and raising the bar in the environmental, social aspects also higher globally, using our market power and using really the strength of our European values. And then third, of course, the standardization strategy very much asks us to look in the future. And when we look in the future, we see the need to bridge with research, to bridge with universities, startups, and I truly appreciate that we have had in this event also discussions to look what it takes to make this bridge, to bring these communities more in line with the more, I would say, traditional standardization communities. So can Commission do this all alone and take things forward on our own? Well, certainly not. And as you well know, standardization really is a co-creation process. And although in the past, perhaps we didn't use all these fancy words about co-creation and so on, but this is a very essence of what we are actually doing in standardization. So the overall aim, of course, of our new strategy is also to regain confidence on what the European Union is able to do, and to show that standards are the basis of our industrial strength and very much the strength of our single market. And there we see the role of our companies, of our civil society really as fundamental to bring your views to us, to bring these views also in such a structured way that it could be taken into account. And this task, of course, requires a well thought through approach and reach to our 27 member states. And so this is really great that AFNOR and the national standardization bodies have called already to monitor in depth the real needs of standards and also to identify where some gaps exist. I was very happy to learn that AFNOR has reached an agreement, which I believe with something like 500 startups to bring, for example, their views to us on the artificial intelligence needs, in the standard needs in artificial intelligence. A good example how we can work with the startup community. And we will convey these needs as appropriate to a soon to be created high-level forum where the Commission, the Member States and the EU society will discuss together these type of lists of EU priorities. And that is, of course, the work that has been, something that has been announced in strategy, and we are taking it now forward to really go forward with the establishment of the forum. And then we have to implement those priorities as appropriate. This is where having suitable standards comes into place, and the Commission will ask the European standardization organizations, of course, to continue their very useful work. And this is also where the national standardization bodies will play a very important role. They have the duty to build up EU standards in support of the needs of the whole society. Our European standardization organizations, in turn, will have the duty to work at the international level as well, with a view to making those standards international, which is where the benefit of our economy of scale can be maximized. So we see that we all have a role ensuring a successful standardization process. And there is more. We need the energies of the new generation to boost our objectives. We need standardization to be extremely well linked to education, to research, to continuously improve and support new technologies, applications, and therefore also new markets. There are ongoing exercises, but we are working also to ensure a coherent ecosystem where education is used to grow expertise and research is used to improve safety, performance, and security, and so on. So the link between research centers, labs, industry, and the national as well as European standardization organizations is already there, but we see we can do a bit more to really get these synergies properly working and enhance. And then what is still missing from the picture? Perhaps funds. Here we will we will need to make best use of the funds available from the Horizon Europe program and other ad hoc funds that the Commission can find in its portfolio. The aim is, of course, to let you spend our money, but in such a way that we certainly work on the priorities and that we provide standards that help Europe stay and even improve in being innovative, creative, and to produce added value. So in the Commission, we have a certain guiding and coordinating role, but the work that we are implementing foresees really a role for each of you. And therefore, really thank you for having been today in the event, and thank you also to keep working with us. Since each of these little pieces is what makes this big puzzle come together in a coherent picture. This also includes, of course, co-legislators. And here I am, in my concluding remarks, I would really like to thank also the French Presidency for their incredible and outstanding work in the legislative process, for the adoption of the many pieces of legislation which will be supported by standards. And so finally, I would like to thank once more our host, AFNOR, for their daily work on standardization, and for organization of this event. And let me say, as the fresh Chief Standardization Officer, I really look forward to continue working with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mrs. Roth. Et c'est à Olivier PEYRAT, directeur général d'AFNOR, vice-président policy du...
The floor to Mr. Olivier PEYRAT, director general AFNOR, vice president policy of CEN, to conclude this conference. Hello, everyone.
Pourquoi ceux qui ont
This
commencé
morning, we really saw why those who have decided to work in the field of standardization haven't changed their minds, because it's so fascinating and so useful. It's my pleasure to serve this community as a vice president policy officer. I'd like to thank all the speakers.
Merci également aussi aux participants.
I'd like to thank the participants also. Standardization is something that allows for smart and concerted actions, because we all know how to act in a smart way. Concerted action is also something that's quite easy to do, but having both at the same time is not that simple. So it's about preparing an action that has been thought throughout, and it can then be implemented in the best way possible and benefit as many people as possible in a win-win approach. The speakers have also shown to us today that this standardization effort is something that more and more people are interested in. We've heard from the Commissioner, Gwenole, and also the brand new CSO. I think this is almost her first speech. I mean, her first speech was made at the CEN and CENELEC Joint General Assembly in Prague last week. So as you can see, as you could see, she is the right person in this position, and she was in charge of the GRC, the Joint Research Center, which is a R&D body that works with the EU Commission. So I'm quite sure that she will help us establish the proper connections. And so this French presidency of the EU is coming to an end, and on the 2nd of February, Commissioner BRETON explained the strategy of the EU in the area of standardization. And since that statement, the strategy of CEN and CENELEC and the strategy of the EU Commission have proven to be quite compatible. The CEN and CENELEC strategy is a bottom-up strategy, and the EU Commission is more of a top-down strategy, which is quite understandable, because the EU Commission is here to provide the direction and the aims. And to give you an example, circular economy could be seen as a lever that would provide for a proper transition. And this is why a concerted and smart action is something that is totally feasible. This has been shown. So the president of AFNOR will agree with me. We've had a fast objective. So standardization is just about optimizing what is being done. Standardization can also be a great leap forward in the right direction, and then things can be fine-tuned at the European level. We know how to do this with the workshop agreements. We know how to do this using international documents and agreements, and we need to make more use of them. Those strategic approaches have also been more detailed during the workshops. We had the Varin mission on mining in France, and innovation is very much a topical issue right now. I would like to thank Vincent Laflèche for his support, relentless support, in order to have research, innovation, and standardization work more closely together. There are going to be workshops on other topics such as SMEs or the relations between the EU and Africa, artificial intelligence or ecosystems such as R&D or generation. We talked about this in Prague. And we need to look at the details also. We needed to make sure that we dig into those topics, and we need to dig in the right direction, and hopefully we will succeed. And in a few days, we will pass on the baton to our Czech colleagues and then to Sweden, because we have always worked in close relationship with our partners in the EU in order to make sure that the EU presidencies can be as efficient and concerted as possible. Regulation 2025, for example, will also be an area of work for the Czech presidency, and I'm sure they will be highly successful. I would like to thank our participants who are following this event remotely. They were even more numerous than the people in the room. This is going to be more and more the case in the future. People being at an event in person, people following the same event on the internet. But for those who are in the room, I mean, the main advantage, they will be able to have access to the buffet afterwards. I also would like to mention the fact that some people in the room, some of our participants were not necessarily experts in the topics discussed by our experts. And I would like to thank the experts for having provided clear information. And you have to really understand that standards can be extremely precious and useful tool. So please spread the word. There are a few displays and billboards outside the room, and we are really communicating on the voluntary standards. We're going to do so in the future. So please, I would like to ask you to promote those voluntary standards also at your level. I'd like to thank you for having been here today. Thank you for having participated in this conference. I hope you are all convinced now that if you are faced with a challenge, you have to think voluntary standard first. Thank you.
Alors juste un mot supplémentaire. Pour les personnes qui restent cet après-midi, vous êtes cordialement invités au cocktail qui vous est proposé dans la salle à côté. Et pour ceux qui participent à l'Assemblée générale, n'oubliez pas de repasser par l'accueil pour recevoir un boîtier de vote et de vous inscrire, signer la liste de présence pour l'Assemblée générale. À 13h30, à partir de 13h30. Merci à tous.